The gunshot echoed through the restaurant. Screams erupted as three masked men burst through Bellissimo's front doors, automatic weapons raised. 92 people, lawyers, businessmen, celebrating families, froze in terror. In the chaos, no one noticed the homeless man who'd been sitting outside stand up and quietly walk toward the entrance. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back 30 minutes. James Crawford sat on the cold concrete outside Bellissimo, his back pressed against the building's limestone facade. The evening crowd moved past him like water flowing around a stone, some averting their eyes, others clutching their purses tighter, a few dropping coins into the paper cup beside him without breaking stride or making eye contact. He was 63 years old, though he looked older. His face was weathered and lined, carved by years of sleeping outdoors and the kind of stress that never quite leaves a man's body. His beard was long and unkempt, more gray than brown, and his clothes, a faded army jacket over layers of mismatched shirts and worn jeans, carried the particular smell of someone who hadn't had access to a shower in weeks. His hands, calloused and scarred, rested on his knees. In his right hand, he held a piece of cardboard with words written in careful block letters, "Homeless vet, anything helps, God bless." The restaurant behind him was a study in contrasts. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warm, golden light spilled out onto the sidewalk. Inside, Chicago's elite dined on $200 steaks and $500 bottles of wine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White tablecloths covered every surface. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner. It was the kind of place where reservation waiting lists stretched months into the future, where celebrating an anniversary or closing a business deal meant something worthy of remembrance. James had never eaten there. He never would. A woman in a Chanel dress approached with her husband and teenage daughter. As they neared James, the woman's expression tightened. She pulled her daughter closer, steering her away from the homeless man as if poverty were contagious. "Excuse me, sir," the husband said, his voice carrying the particular tone of someone used to being obeyed. He didn't look at James directly. "You're blocking the entrance." James glanced at the wide sidewalk, at the 10 feet of clear space on either side of him. "I'm not blocking anything, sir. Just sitting." "You're making customers uncomfortable," the man continued. He wore a Rolex that caught the restaurant's light. "This is a high-end establishment. Your presence is inappropriate." James had heard variations of this speech 1,000 times. "I'm on public property. I have as much right to be here as anyone." The woman leaned in to whisper something to her husband, her eyes never leaving James, as if he were something dangerous, something to be managed and removed. The husband nodded and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the restaurant manager." They swept past him into Bellissimo, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and casual cruelty. James sighed and adjusted his position against the wall. His back ached. It always ached now. A souvenir from a helicopter crash in Kandahar 20 years ago. His left knee, shattered by shrapnel in Fallujah, throbbed in the November cold. But he stayed. He always stayed. This spot, outside this particular restaurant, had become something like routine in a life that had lost most of its structure. The service door beside the entrance opened, and a young man in a waiter's uniform stepped out. Carlos Rivera carried a wrapped sandwich and a cup of coffee. He glanced back through the door, checking for the manager, then approached James. "Hey, James." Carlos held out the sandwich. "Turkey Club. Kitchen made too many." James knew it was a lie, a kind lie. He took the sandwich. "Thanks, Carlos. You're going to get yourself in trouble." Carlos shrugged and sat down beside him, ignoring the cold concrete. His left leg stretched out carefully. James had noticed the limp. "How's the knee tonight?" "Same as always. How's yours?" "IED outside Ramadi, 2006, Carlos said, rubbing his ankle. "Doctor said I was lucky it was just my foot." "Lucky." He said the word like it tasted bitter. "Helicopter crash, Kandahar, 2003, James replied. "Plus shrapnel in Fallujah, 2004. Plus about 6 other things I've stopped counting." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two veterans who didn't need to explain the weight they carried. Carlos pulled out his own sandwich and unwrapped it. "You know Richard's going to kick you out again," Carlos said quietly. "That woman who just went in," she complained, "said you're ruining the ambiance." James smiled without humor. The ambiance. Yeah. If it helps, Carlos said, you're the most polite homeless guy I've ever met. Never beg, never hassle anyone. Just sit there like you're waiting for something. Maybe I am, James said. He took a bite of the sandwich. Real turkey, good bread. Carlos always brought him the good stuff, not the day-old scraps. Army? Yeah, 4 years. Got out in '08. You? 21 years, 75th Rangers, got out in 2002. James's voice carried no pride, just a statement of fact. Carlos's eyes widened. Rangers? Jesus, man, that's serious? It was a long time ago. That kind of training doesn't just go away. Carlos studied James with new understanding. What happened? If you don't mind me asking, James was quiet for a long moment, the same thing that happens to a lot of us. Came home. Couldn't adjust. PTSD, they said, but medication made it worse. Lost my job, then my apartment, then everything else just kind of fell away. He shrugged. Been on the street 4 years now. Could be worse. Could be better, Carlos said firmly. Look, there are programs. The VA has housing assistance. I could help you. I've tried, James interrupted gently. Waiting lists are 2 years long. Shelters are full. Programs are underfunded. I'm doing okay, Carlos, really. Before Carlos could respond, the restaurant manager emerged. Richard Chen wore the carefully cultivated expression of someone who dealt with problems efficiently and without emotion. He was in his 40s, slim, with wire-rimmed glasses and a tailored suit. Carlos, Richard said sharply, your break ended 5 minutes ago. Get back inside. Carlos stood reluctantly. Yes, sir. He glanced at James. Be careful, man. After Carlos disappeared inside, Richard turned to James. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. Again. I'm not on your property, James said. This is a public sidewalk. You're deterring customers. We've had 3 complaints in the last hour. Richard's jaw tightened. I don't want to call the police, but I will. I'm a veteran, James said quietly. 21 years in the Army, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just trying to survive. That's unfortunate, Richard said, his voice flat, but it's not my problem. You have 2 minutes. He turned and walked back inside. James didn't move. The sandwich Carlos brought him sat half-eaten beside him. The November wind picked up, cutting through his layers. He pulled his jacket tighter and watched the people inside Bellissimo through the window. Warm, fed, safe. Living lives that felt impossibly distant from his own. Inside the restaurant, the woman in the Chanel dress sat with her family at a prime table near the window. Her name was Patricia Morrison, though James would never know that. She was celebrating her daughter Emily's acceptance to Princeton. Her husband, Robert, was a corporate attorney who billed $800 an hour. Patricia glanced out the window and saw James still sitting there. Her expression hardened. She'd already complained once. The fact that he was still there felt like a personal affront, as if his mere existence was designed to ruin her evening. Unbelievable, she muttered to her husband. He's still there. What does it take to get these people to leave? Robert looked up from his wine. I'm sure the manager will handle it. He should have handled it already, Patricia said. She raised her hand to flag down their waiter. Emily Morrison, 17 years old and wearing a designer dress for the celebration, looked out the window at the homeless man. Something in his stillness caught her attention. The way he sat, back straight, despite the obvious exhaustion, eyes alert, despite the defeat. She'd seen a documentary in her AP history class about Vietnam veterans. Something about the man outside reminded her of the soldiers in those old photographs. Mom, Emily said quietly, maybe we should just leave him alone. He's not hurting anyone. Sweetie, Patricia said in that patient tone adults use when explaining the world to children. People like that. They made their choices. If he'd made better decisions in life, he wouldn't be in that position. Emily wanted to argue, but she'd learned that her mother's worldview didn't bend easily. She looked back out the window. The homeless man was eating a sandwich now, slowly, like he was making it last. She wondered when his last meal had been before this one. At 8:47 p.m., a black SUV pulled up and double-parked in front of Bellissimo. 3 men got out. They wore dark clothes, ski masks, and moved with purposeful coordination. Each carried a weapon. 2 had pistols. 1 had what looked like an AR-15 style rifle. James saw them immediately. His posture changed. The relaxed slump of exhaustion vanished, replaced by something else, something sharp and alert and very, very dangerous. His eyes tracked their movements, his breathing steadied. His hands, which had been trembling slightly from cold and hunger, went still. 23 years since he'd left active duty. But Rangers don't forget. The training doesn't fade. It just waits, buried under the weight of civilian life, ready to resurface when needed. The three men didn't even glance at him. To them, he was invisible, just another piece of human debris decorating the city's edges. They walked past him and pushed through Bellissimo's front doors. That's when the first gunshot rang out. One of the men fired into the ceiling. Plaster and dust rained down. The pianist stopped mid-note. 92 people froze, forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses suspended in toasts, conversations cut off mid-word. "Everybody down!" The man with the rifle swept his weapon across the room. "Phones on the tables! Now!" Chaos erupted. People dove under tables, women screamed, a child started crying. Someone dropped a plate that shattered against the marble floor. The sound of terrified breathing filled the space between the armed men's shouted commands. "Wallets! Jewelry! Put it all in the bags!" The second gunman pulled out black duffel bags and started throwing them at terrified diners. "You have 30 seconds before someone gets hurt!" Patricia Morrison clutched Emily. Both of them crouched under the table. Robert's face had gone white. His Rolex, Patricia's diamond necklace, worth maybe $50,000 combined, suddenly seemed like the cheapest price imaginable for their lives. In the kitchen, Carlos had hit the silent alarm the moment he heard the first gunshot. Police response time to this part of downtown was typically 4 to 6 minutes, but the gunmen seemed to know this. They were working fast, methodically collecting valuables. Richard Chen stood frozen behind the host stand. One of the gunmen shoved him toward the floor. "Get down! Where's the safe?" Outside, James stood up, not quickly. His knee screamed in protest and his back spasmed from the sudden movement, but he stood. Through the window, he could see the chaos inside. People on the floor, armed men moving between tables, weapons raised. Most people would have run. Most people would have called 911 and waited for professionals. Most people would have decided that whatever was happening inside that expensive restaurant wasn't their problem, especially not for the people who'd just tried to run him off like a stray dog. But James Crawford wasn't most people. He was a veteran of the 75th Ranger Regiment. He'd led a platoon through 3 combat deployments. He'd earned a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters. And every one of those skills, buried under years of PTSD and homelessness and society's indifference, suddenly came roaring back. He assessed the situation with tactical clarity. 3 hostels, 90-plus civilians, enclosed space, limited exits, unknown time until police arrival. The element of surprise was his only advantage. They thought he was nobody, nothing, a homeless drunk who didn't matter. They were wrong. But James needed a weapon. His eyes scanned the sidewalk and landed on a dumpster beside the restaurant, construction debris from recent renovations. Among the trash, he spotted a length of metal pipe, maybe 2 feet long. He crossed to it, moving faster than his body wanted to allow. His knee nearly buckled. His hands shook as he grabbed the pipe, not from fear, but from the tremor that came from too many cold nights and not enough food. The pipe felt heavy, heavier than it should have been, heavier than the rifles he'd carried in Kandahar. But it would have to do. James moved to the entrance. The door had been left slightly ajar. He could hear them inside, shouting, the sounds of terrified compliance, someone crying. He needed to move fast. His body wasn't what it used to be. He wasn't the 30-year-old ranger who could clear a room in seconds. He was 63, homeless, hurting, and running on muscle memory that was 2 decades old. But it was enough. Inside, the situation was deteriorating. One of the gunmen, the shortest one, wielding a pistol, was losing patience. An elderly man fumbled with his wedding ring, arthritic fingers struggling. The gunman pressed the pistol to the old man's temple. "You have 3 seconds. 1, 2. Wait, please," the man's wife sobbed. "He has arthritis. Just give him a moment." The gunman cocked the hammer. James stepped through the door. No one noticed him at first. All attention was on the drama unfolding near the center of the restaurant. James moved along the wall, staying low, using tables and the confusion as cover. Each step sent pain shooting through his knee. His breath came harder than it should have, but the training was there, embedded in muscle and bone and memory. His target was the nearest gunman, the one by the entrance, facing inward, his back exposed. The man held a pistol loosely in his right hand. James closed the distance. 4 steps. 5. His bad knee nearly gave out on the 6th. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. The pipe came up in a cross, not as fast as it would have been 20 years ago, not as smooth, but accurate. The metal caught the gunman across the back of the skull. The man dropped, his pistol clattering to the marble floor. James caught the pistol, his hands moving on autopilot. Checked the magazine. 15 rounds, 1 in the chamber. Safety off. Good enough. The second gunman was already turning, his weapon coming up. James dropped behind an overturned table as shots rang out. Wood splintered. China exploded. Screams erupted around him. James counted shots. 7, 8, 9. His arms trembled, holding the position. His back screamed. But he waited. The shooting stopped. James rolled out from cover and fired. The first shot went wide. His hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The second caught the gunman in the shoulder, spinning him. The third hit center mass. The man went down, 2 down, 1 left. The man with the rifle was near the kitchen entrance, using a support column for cover. He was young. James could tell by his voice when he shouted, "You're dead, old man! You hear me? Dead! The rifle was the problem. Superior range, superior firepower." James had maybe 10 rounds left in an unfamiliar pistol. His hands were shaking. His vision blurred at the edges. Adrenaline couldn't completely overcome hunger and exhaustion. "These people didn't do anything to you," James called out, his voice steady despite everything. "Let them go. You and I can settle this. I'm nobody, just trying to get money. This wasn't supposed to happen." The voice cracked. Young. Scared. James heard desperation in it, the kind that came from being invisible for different reasons. "What's your name, son?" "Shut up. I'm James. I've been nobody too. I know how it feels." James shifted position, ignoring the protest from his knee. "But you don't have to hurt these people. Police are already coming. You can still walk out." For a moment, just a moment, the young man's weapon lowered slightly. His hands were shaking visibly. Then someone's phone rang. The sharp electronic sound shattered the fragile moment. The gunman's finger twitched on the trigger. James saw it happening and moved on pure instinct. But his body couldn't match what his mind commanded. He threw himself sideways, too slow, his knee giving out. But he fired as he fell. Not at the gunman. At the overhead lights above the support column. Glass and sparks rained down. The gunman flinched, stepping out of cover for just a fraction of a second. James fired again from the floor. Once, twice, 3 times. The first shot went wide. The second hit the rifle, knocking it from the young man's grip. The third caught him in the leg. The man went down screaming. James crawled forward. His knee wouldn't support him anymore, and kicked the rifle away. He checked for other threats. None. It was over. The restaurant was silent except for sirens approaching and the wounded gunman's moaning. James tried to stand and couldn't. His knee had finally given out completely. He sat on the floor, still holding the pistol, his hands shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. When the SWAT team burst through the doors, rifles raised, voices shouting, "Drop the weapon!" James carefully placed the gun on the floor and raised his trembling hands. "I'm unarmed," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Civilians secure. 3 suspects down." They swarmed him anyway, pushed him flat, zip-tied his hands, standard procedure. He didn't resist. Around him, hostages began crawling out from under tables, crying, shaking, alive. It took 20 minutes for the police to sort out what had happened. Security camera footage confirmed the story. Witnesses, 92 of them, gave statements. The zip ties came off. A detective apologized. An EMT tried to check James, but he waved them off at first. "Check the people who were actually in danger," he said, but his knee was swelling badly. The EMT insisted. While they wrapped it, James watched the scene around him, people hugging, crying, calling loved ones to say they were alive. Then he saw her approaching. Patricia Morrison's Chanel dress was torn at the knee, her carefully styled hair disheveled. Mascara streaked her face. Emily stood beside her, clutching her mother's hand. They stopped in front of James, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Patricia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. How do you apologize for treating someone as less than human? What words could possibly be enough? Emily stepped forward first. "Thank you," she said quietly. You saved my mom. You saved everyone. James looked at the girl, then at Patricia. He saw shame in the woman's eyes, shame so profound it seemed to physically hurt her. I'm sorry. Patricia's voice broke. I'm so sorry. What I said, how I treated you, I told myself you made bad choices, that you deserved. She couldn't finish. Tears spilled down her face. You risked your life for us. For me, after I tried to have you arrested for just sitting there. I don't understand. James was quiet for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. I don't need you to understand, ma'am. I just need you to see us, all of us out here on your sidewalks. We're not invisible. We're not trash. We're people. Some of us are veterans who served our country and got lost somewhere between the war and coming home. We're still here. We're still human. Patricia's carefully constructed world, the one where poverty was a personal failing and homeless people were problems to be removed, crumbled completely. She dropped to her knees beside James, not caring about her expensive dress on the dirty floor. I was so wrong, she whispered, about everything. Please let us help you. Money, housing, whatever you need. Robert Morrison approached, his face pale, his Rolex somehow still on his wrist. He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands. Anything, name it. James looked at the thick wallet, at the credit cards and cash. A month ago, he might have taken it, but something had shifted tonight. Keep your money, he said gently. Use it to help other veterans. There are organizations, programs, people who need it more than I do right now. But you're homeless, Robert protested. You're living on the street. I'm alive, James corrected, and so is everyone in this room. That's enough for tonight. A detective approached, a man in his 50s with graying hair. Mr. Crawford, I'm Detective Mike Sullivan, CPD. We'll need a full statement, but first, he extended his hand. My son served in Afghanistan. He'd be honored to know someone like you was out there. James shook his hand. Just did what needed doing. No, Sullivan said firmly. You did what most people couldn't do. That's training, experience, and courage. I'm recommending you for a civilian commendation. Carlos pushed through the crowd, still in his waiter's uniform. James, man, that was incredible. I knew you were Rangers, but... He trailed off, shaking his head. Long time ago, James said. Once a Ranger, Carlos replied. He looked at the EMT wrapping James's knee. How bad? He needs to go to the hospital, the EMT said. That knee is badly damaged. I'm fine, James protested. You're not fine, Carlos said firmly. And you're not arguing. I'm riding with you. You just saved 92 lives. Let someone take care of you for once. 3 weeks later, James Crawford stood outside Bellissimo again. But everything was different. He wore clean clothes, jeans and a warm jacket from a veterans organization. He'd had showers, hot meals, a real bed at a transitional housing facility. The shelter had connected him with better VA benefits, job placement services, physical therapy for his knee. His face was still weathered, but the exhaustion had lifted slightly. He looked less like someone slowly fading away and more like someone finding his way back. The restaurant had reopened after repairs. Through the window, James could see the familiar warm glow. But now, when people walked past him, some stopped. Some recognized him from the news. Some shook his hand. Carlos emerged carrying 2 cups of coffee. Here you go. Extra cream, 2 sugars. James accepted it gratefully. You don't have to keep doing this. I know, but I want to. Carlos sat beside him on the bench the restaurant had installed. Richard Chen's idea, a small acknowledgement. Besides, Richard said you're welcome inside anytime you want. On the house. Actually, he wants to talk to you about something. About what? A job, if you're interested. Nothing fancy. Maintenance, security consultation. But it's something. James looked at the restaurant. The place that had wanted him gone 3 weeks ago now wanted him inside. The irony wasn't lost on him. Maybe, he said. I'll think about it. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 veterans watching the evening crowd. A woman walked past, not Patricia, but someone who'd been there that night, and stopped to press money into James's hand despite his protests. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. After she left, Carlos shook his head. You're famous now. Homeless veteran saves Chicago restaurant. It's been everywhere. Fame doesn't change anything for the others, James said quietly. There are thousands of veterans still out here, still invisible. My story went viral, but theirs remain untold. So what do we do? James took a sip of his coffee and looked at the city around them, at the people hurrying past, at the homeless veteran across the street that no one was stopping to acknowledge, at the vast machinery of indifference that kept turning. We keep telling their stories, James said. We make people see them. We remind everyone that the person they're walking past without looking might be the person who saves their life someday, because they are not invisible. They never were. We just stopped looking. As evening deepened and city lights came on, James Crawford sat on that bench, no longer sleeping on concrete, but still keeping watch, still serving in the quiet way that real soldiers do. Because some men don't need a uniform to be warriors. They just need a reason to remember who they are. James Crawford's story stands as a powerful reminder that heroism doesn't depend on wealth, status, or social approval. It depends on the courage to act when action is needed most, on the training that never fades, and on the fundamental dignity that poverty can never erase. His story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that we walk past heroes every day without seeing them, that we judge worth by appearance rather than character, and that sometimes the person we dismiss as nobody is the someone who will save us all. We created a hidden story to honor veterans like James Crawford, the ones society has rendered invisible, the ones whose service didn't end when they left the military, the ones who still protect and serve even when the world has abandoned them. These are the stories that demand to be told, the heroes who deserve recognition, and the lessons we cannot afford to forget. If James's story moved you, if his courage and sacrifice reminded you that every person matters regardless of their circumstances, we invite you to join our mission. Subscribe to Hidden Story and become part of a community that refuses to let heroes remain invisible. Every subscription helps us find and share more stories of silent courage. Every like ensures these narratives reach people who need this reminder. Every share honors the veterans who still serve in ways we rarely see. We want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Whether you're in Boston or Bangkok, Denver or Dubai, your voice adds to this global conversation about dignity, service, and the heroes hidden in plain sight. We love reading your comments, and your reflections on these stories inspire us to keep searching for more untold tales of heroism. Together, we ensure that no veteran remains invisible, that no act of courage is forgotten, and that the silent warriors among us finally receive the recognition they have always deserved. Like this video if you believe heroism has no address and dignity transcends circumstance. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded to look twice at the people they pass by. And subscribe to Hidden Story, because every hero deserves their moment in the light, and every story of service deserves to be heard.